Teachers of Reddit, what is the best roast you ever told a student? I'm not a teacher, but this is a legendary one that I've heard. The kids are in a math class, and one kid just raises his hand, and when am I ever going to use this in real life? The teacher says you won't. But the smart kids will. The other day another teacher came into our class who has a bald head, and he just got it waxed or something, and my mate says fresh polish sir, and the teacher fires back with anything for your mother mate. Class went apeshit. My high school teacher put the sign up by the clock that said time will pass but will you? May not be a roast, but my high school teachers were very dry. Teacher, my mother, please sit down. The lesson has started. Student, you can't tell me that. I'm not a dog. Teacher, I know you're not a dog. Because a dog is able to do that simple command. She is still proud about that one, and tells it at family gatherings. My maths teacher in secondary school stuck my middle finger up at her. Only one finger for a woman my age. My 15-year-old self was mortified. You won that battle, Ms. Walcott. I got random breakouts, and I was talking to my English teacher about how a big forehead pimple I had was finally going away, and I also had a cold sore on my lip, and so I told him all excited, look, it's going away, and he says yeah, and it fell down to your lip. Not a teacher, but there was this small annoying kid on my class, and one day he came to school with a graduation hat. He started to be annoying and said something to the teacher, so the teacher said, where did you graduate from? Puppy school? Not a teacher, but my friend was, and still is annoying sometimes, and looks for some laughs every now and then. We sit down on a bench during lunchtime and we see a teacher walk by. She calls over to the teacher. Hey sir, Jim that bin. We have some trash. He looks back at us and yells. Why? Do you want me to put you in it? While explaining how reproduction works, one of my students was making gnarly comments, so I said don't worry, you won't be getting any. Physical science class back in middle school. We had a super cool and chill teacher, and one of the students in the class was a really weird kid. But the teacher really liked him. Teacher also liked to pick on and tease his students. We got to boron on the periodic table and he said, boron. That student's name, but with an M. I had a kid picking on the religious girl in class, asking her all sorts of tricky theological questions, just so he could catch her out or something. When he asked, does hell exist? I said yes, it does. It's here, in the classroom, with you. One day a kid from my health class brought a fidget spinner to play with. My health teacher took one look and told him, 2017 called and wants their toy back. Put it away. I'm not a teacher, but I remember when I was 13 we had a really laid back, jokey science teacher. When one of my mates asked if he could go to the toilet, my teacher let him, but just as he was about to get to the door the teacher shouted that he'd forgotten something. My mate turned around to see my teacher holding a magnifying glass and a pair of tweezers. I was joking around with a student one day, and he was making some insults about my name. In response, I asked him, do you know what I like about you? What? He replied. I said nothing. He laughed about that. The next day, our guidance counselor pulled me aside with a worried expression. I got a call from student's mother. Did you tell student you like nothing about him? It turned out that the kid told his mother about that because he thought it was funny. But she was like, how dare a teacher say that to my child? And she called the school to complain. Fortunately, the administration believed my report of how it had happened. An English teacher, not me, was teaching the lay thing, and he did so by drawing up a table. The rows were the tenses, and the columns were icons for each action. There was someone laying down a sword, someone lying in bed, and someone telling a lie. Name is handsome. I was about to start a lesson when a goofball kid from another class I also teach walked to the still open door. Sounds slightly better in Finnish. But whatever. Hey teach. My next lesson is boring. Can I come to this one instead? I'm sorry student name, but this is a 7th grade lesson. An 8. Grader like you would be at an unfair advantage. Or what? How come can't still be on the 7 grade? I also wonder this every single day. I was an on-trad student, over 40 at the time, going to graduate school, and working as a teaching assistant for astronomy lab. I loved this job. Basically the vast majority of my students, this was their first semester at college. It was hilarious to watch the students transition to living away from mommy and daddy. Couple stories. We had an assignment which required downloading a piece of free software, and then using that software on several nights during the course of a month. I would check with students on their progress weekly. While many of the students naturally waited until the last minute, one student told me that he did not have a computer. I said, "What about borrowing a friend's computer?" He had no friends. There was a phone app. No phone. I asked him how he writes anything for other classes. He says he has never needed to write anything. I ask him what year he is in school. He says he is a junior. I was like, you have made it 3 to 4 years in university and never needed a computer? He said yes. I said, well, this a first for you then, since you will need to find a computer to finish this course. Had a student show up halfway through the semester because he was not aware that the course had a lab. He honestly sounded like a bright kid, just never caught on during the multiple announcements during lecture about the lab section. I was teaching a programming course at a college and got tired of students asking if I could give them a practice exam prior to the midterm. One day I walked into class and wrote on the whiteboard, "Practice exam." It took a minute, but someone pointed out that I had misspelled practice, so I turned and looked up at the whiteboard and then exclaimed, "You're right. There is no F in practice exam." In my country we have grades 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 5 being an A and 1 meaning you didn't pass. When I was in high school we had a guy that wasn't very good at math. Professor was giving us test results. He called him and said, "You got 2. A pause where the guy gets very happy. Point switches 1. First day of class. Walked in to see a giant cock and balls drawn on the whiteboard. Okay. This isn't entirely unexpected from a bunch of low ability 14 over 15-year-old boys from very religious families. Start to wipe it off. It's been done in permanent marker. Hearing lots of snickering from a particular corner. Small voice whispers to me, "If you go over it with dry wipe, it'll come off, miss." Considered the implications of the head walking in as I'm painstakingly going over the outline. Slowly, I turn my head towards the source of the snickering. 3 boys are then instructed to do it for me. "You need to pay more attention to the base of the shaft, Michael. You've missed the tip of the glands." Once it had been done and the entire thing had been erased, I ended the 10 minutes of agony for them by announcing, "Right, just before we start the work you will now be continuing into your lunch break. I just want to say one thing. If that artwork is in any way, shape or form a self-portrait, I strongly suggest that the owner gets himself to a doctor, as Piran will interfere with both masturbatory and, if a miracle occurs and they find themselves somebody actually willing to copulate with them, sexual satisfaction." I work in a boarding house at a school and I have a year 12 wing. I don't work weekends. Some year 7s saw me on Monday and asked if I had missed them, and I replied, "Who are you guys?" They are just young enough to wonder if I'm being serious when I say things like that. Not a teacher, but when the class heard that my sister's teacher was getting married, the one bully in the class laughed pretty loudly. Our teacher immediately tore that pose a new one, saying that with his attitude he wouldn't ever find someone. I had a really fun teacher everyone liked, and when students were talking about their various weekend exploits, he'd stare at them and then go, "Has anyone ever told you that you're an idiot? I'm not calling you one, but has anyone ever told you that?" My biology teacher was a bit of a dickhead, always making jokes about how boys were better than girls, making remarks about people's appearance, etc. He also used to beat people with a 1 meter long ruler, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, we started the chapter about sexual reproduction, and at the end of the chapter we would do a graded dissection of either the male or female reproductive system of rabbits. My teacher was explaining how the female reproductive system worked before turning to one of my classmates and said, "Q, Better pay attention. This is the closest you'll ever come to seeing what a woman looks like under her clothes. I was rehearsing our university concert choir in a vocal fugue. When the piece faltered, a tenor raised his hand and said, "It's my fault, I got a beat off." I said nothing, just looked. But the bass sitting next to him said, "Not even Handel could squeeze 5 quarters in a 4-beat measure."